In this video, I'm going to show you how to overcome social anxiety at work, and stick around to the end because there's a number of these things which I haven't seen other people talking about. As you'll know, work can be an absolute minefield when it comes to social anxiety. Whether it's walking past superiors in the corridor, bumping into colleagues in the cafeteria, around the water cooler, at the coffee machine, that dreaded Monday morning meeting where you all have to go around the table and give your report on the week ahead, giving presentations, speaking up in meetings, walking into a crowded room or an office when people are already sitting in there, getting up to leave our seat and leave a crowded office or a crowded room, having to walk up to members of a different team and ask them about a piece of work. You name it, there are so many situations which can leave our nerves feeling absolutely frayed. Working with professionals, this is a topic which just comes up again and again and again, and I know from my own experience how difficult it can be. I used to work in the diplomatic service in the embassy in Beijing, and this really brought my social anxiety to an absolute head, and this was when things got so bad that I really had to make a decision to tackle it head on. At one point, my struggles working in the embassy were so bad I actually had to go to a doctor, and I ended up on Zoloft and also propranolol. So I really know very well from my own experience how harrowing it can be living with social anxiety at work. I used to be absolutely drained every single day. I would have actual panic attacks in front of my boss and believe that he could see I was probably quote unquote crazy. I thought lots of people in the embassy knew that I had huge mental health problems. I suffered from tension headaches and nervous exhaustion because of all of this, day in, day out, living with this amount of anxiety. And this experience is something I hear echoed week after week on calls with my clients. They are also struggling in the same way. They hold down well-paid jobs in prestigious companies, and from the outside it might look like they're doing very well, but internally there's just so much struggle going on, and it leaves them very little emotional and mental bandwidth to do other things. Living in this way can put a huge strain on us physically, emotionally, and mentally. Oftentimes clients will complain that when they go home after work, they don't really have the energy to be present with their children or with their partners. It also leads to many of them taking medications, and all of this just leaves you generally feeling burnt out. But on top of that, of course, there is the professional drawbacks as well. If you are performing badly in the workplace continually because of your nerves, you're maybe not able to present as well as you could, or you avoid presentations or avoid certain situations altogether. This can really hinder our chances of promotion, of personal and professional development, and can also impact our economic bottom line if we're not getting the pay raises and putting ourselves forward for the kind of positions we could. And as is the pattern which we've talked about so often on this channel, there is usually an element of underachievement in social anxiety sufferers, even such as myself when I was working at the embassy, or the people that I coach. When they're working well within a company, they could oftentimes do a lot better. So as I said before, there are myriad situations where anxiety manifests in the workplace, and this can be walking into the office in the morning. It might even start way before you get into the office and your drive to work, you're dreading going in. For me, the Monday morning meeting was the bane of my existence. It was like school when you have to introduce yourself in class, and it would start off with the team leader, then we would go around the table in descending seniority, so I was second to last, and all of that time, it took almost an hour, and the tension would be building and building and building, and by the time it got to me, sometimes I would be in such a state of panic that I could barely even get my words out. Many clients talk about a similar situation. They talk about being very inhibited and almost unable to even speak up in meetings. They will think that whatever they say is going to be perceived as stupid. They have this very harsh internal dialogue going on in their heads which says, don't say that, why would you say that? People are going to think that's stupid, that's not a valid comment. So in the end they just sit there, and then they start to shame themselves as well because they're thinking that their boss is going to think they're stupid for not contributing, or they just start to scorn themselves for being so weak and for not speaking up in meetings, and it goes into that downward spiral of shame and recrimination. Many clients have also talked about pressure that they feel if they're sitting in an open plan office, and oftentimes if no one's speaking, this can also exacerbate the feeling of tension because they feel like maybe they should say something, or they're responsible for the silence. They don't know what other people are thinking. They need constant reassurance from the people around them that they're liked in the workplace. And something I used to do is that I would almost keep a mental scorecard of people within the embassy that I felt I had embarrassed myself in front of, or people that had seen me have a quote unquote meltdown or panic attack, which I often did in meetings, whether it was perceptible to other people or not. But I would think, oh, Janine saw me have a meltdown in that town hall meeting, but then she treated me normally on Monday, so maybe that's been forgotten and now we're okay. And I would look at other people and think, oh, he hasn't seen me freak out yet, he thinks I'm normal. So I would have this constant scorecard and narrative going on in my head of this has happened, but then that happened, but then they spoke to me normally and they seem to be okay with me now, and I had a meltdown in front of my boss in that one-on-one on Friday, but then he's being okay with me now, so maybe it's forgotten and he's just pretending it never happened, so maybe that we're okay. And that's incredibly exhausting when you're just living like that, trying to completely rearrange your external environment all the time to just reassure you, like, I'm okay, I'm liked, people don't know I'm crazy, this person does think I'm crazy, and trying to juggle things in that way, it's incredibly exhausting and just not sustainable at all. It's not the right way to go about things in the office. Okay, awesome. So now we've outlined some of the problems. Let's talk about how the heck do we go about correcting them or dealing with them. So first off, I want to talk about meetings. And this is one where you just really have to go into it. You got to lean in, bite the bullet. And I also recommend doing some exposures. So for me, Toastmasters was a massive thing. I've talked about this before, but this was a real game changer for me, because having shied away from any kind of presentation or performance for so long, I then started to go to Toastmasters in Beijing, and it really bolstered my confidence. And what I found was that in meetings, even if I was sitting there thinking, oh, this is not the right thing to say, someone's going to think I'm stupid, blah, 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 I would just have to bite the bullet, put my hand up and just say something, because the more you shrink away and the more you try and avoid participating or avoid that person who is giving the presentation looking at you and calling on you for some kind of participation, the worse it gets, and you kind of start to draw negative attention to yourself in that way. So I really found that just getting in early, I used to call it leaning into the punch. I would just lean in, get in there early. And one very good example of this was there used to be a young diplomats luncheon that would be held at a restaurant in Beijing, a different restaurant each week, and I would be invited to go and represent the British Embassy sometimes. What I would do is I would just deliberately get my voice heard straight away. Like, I would be the first one just to put my hand up and say, sorry, did you hear that from the Swedish Embassy, or was that at the EU meeting, or whatever it was. I would just throw something out just to like break the seal on my throat, so that I was then involved, and I had that kind of feedback that people recognized that I was involved in the meeting, and I felt more included. Whereas if I just sat there and let things go on and on and on, it's as if the muscle in your throat just starts to constrict. You can't break that seal and you cannot get involved, and it just creates more and more tension, and you feel more and more isolated, and it makes it harder and harder to even break into the conversation and get involved in the meeting. So in terms of meetings, do some Toastmasters if you're really struggling. I highly recommend it. Lean in, get in there early, break the seal, get your voice heard. And also with that internal dialogue, you just got to screw it and do it. You can't listen to that second guessing of, oh, people are going to roll their eyes if I say that, people think that's weak. The problem with social anxiety is it's too much thinking and it's too much negative thinking. So whatever you do, there's just going to be layer after layer of thinking of, oh, I said that, but I shouldn't have said that. Oh, no, I have said that. That was the wrong thing to say. Now everyone's thinking I'm an idiot. You just cannot go down that rabbit hole or get involved with it. Just stick your hand up, say it, and just be done with it. I know that sounds simplistic, but you do have to learn that mechanism of just cutting it off and just leaning right in and do it. And what I found is that it actually becomes so exhilarating, you start to get a little bit addicted to it. And I remember there was one press conference at the Danish embassy where they were talking about polar regions, and I even got up, and I was getting so used to doing this, I actually got the microphone and was the first person to actually pose a question with media present and everything, because I was already getting a high from doing this stuff, and that gave me a huge high, because that was one of the first times I've ever stood up with a microphone and asked a question in a situation where there was media present as well. So it becomes a virtuous cycle. Once you start getting into this, it's like doing stunts on a motorbike or jumping out of a plane or something. It gives you a real adrenaline high. The second point I wanted to say is about avoidance. Now, what I used to do is I would go into the office super early before anyone else got in, so that I wouldn't have to walk into a busy office. And I would wait until the very last minute and be the last person to leave, so people didn't see me walking across the office, because I didn't want to be observed. And I would also take these little rat runs, because the embassy is a very old building in Beijing, and instead of going down the main corridors, I would scuttle around these little back alleyways to go to the coffee machine and stuff like that. And all of that is avoidance behavior. And I do not recommend avoidance, because it just makes your problems worse. It will fester. It will not get better by avoiding it, and it just offers short-term relief, but you're storing up more and more problems in the long term. So I do highly, highly recommend facing your fears. For example, if it's walking down the corridor, I have got another section on this in another video I made on eye contact. Try and keep your gaze upwards and somewhere towards the person in a neutral zone, not directly at them, but just so you're up and engaged, because as with all things in social anxiety, if you start to go down, you start to attract negative attention towards you, and then you have to make a big jump between looking down to looking up. I found it very useful to try and just keep my body language and my posture open and my gaze somewhere in the region, and then when I walk past the deputy ambassador, I could just go, "Good morning, Andrew," rather than make a big thing of looking at him. So don't shy away from these things. Don't avoid. Please face your fears and try and do it with an open and relaxed body language, posture and gaze, and I will put the video up on screen so you can see more about that, how to cross people in corridors. Another very important factor in reducing anxiety in the workplace is just to try and bring down your baseline level of anxiety generally. And this can be done by adding certain things and taking certain things away. So we can take away anxiety-inducing stimuli like lots of news, lots of music and podcasts, anything that agitates the nervous system, lots of caffeine, this kind of thing, and we can add in things which are more relaxing. So really, breath retraining is one of the first and foremost most effective means of doing this, making sure you're breathing from the diaphragm, also working with your posture. Try and put your awareness down into your center of gravity, which is around your pelvic region, rather than have all your energy and your awareness up in your head. And try to use mindfulness to make long, slow, languid movements and to slow your breathing down rather than all this kind of jerky stuff. And when we're talking, we're twizzling our ring around on our finger or rocking from foot to foot and touching our face and this kind of stuff. Try and bring an awareness to your whole being so that you keep your hands down, you slow your speech down, you engage with the person. Yes, I understand, because what's happening when you've got social anxiety in the workplace is you're just ratcheted up, and it's as if your nervous system is kind of fizzing away inside. All the energy is just bouncing around so erratically. So you have to try and get a conscious control of it, bring the energy downwards, and just try and with conscious effort, gain control again over the nervous system more, rather than have it move us around and next thing you know, your hand is coming up to your face without you even knowing it, or you're starting to twitch, or your eye is twitching and your face is twitching. You can use an element of conscious control to bring down some of that anxiety and to bring some control to these autonomic functions as well. And the breath is one of the most important keys in doing that, to control the autonomic nervous system with the mind. So another way you could address these issues is to build in some accountability. And by all means, please use this channel for that. Leave a comment below saying, I am going to go to Toastmasters, or I am going to speak up in every meeting going forward, even if it's just one sentence. So please use this channel for accountability if you would like to. Failing that, if there's someone, a spouse or a partner or a friend who could maybe hold you more accountable and say, right, for the rest of this year, I'm gonna make a vow that I am gonna lean in and I am gonna participate in the rest of the meetings at work, because this has gone on long enough and I can't keep shying away from stuff. One final point I would like to make is, if you're in a meeting and there's a sense of anticipation with things building up, such as in the Monday morning meeting that I used to have in the embassy, where it would go around the table, if I bought into that narrative and felt, oh, it's building, oh, it's coming, now, more and more time is elapsing and more pressure is increasing, then I would feel that. But there was also a way where I could opt out of that, and I could try and lose myself in what people were saying, try and really focus on Craig. Craig was a funny guy, and try and really get into the meeting rather than living in my head and my narrative, which is, oh, my scary bit is coming up and it's like only 5 minutes away now, or only 3 minutes away now, and building into that narrative. Try and opt out of that kind of thing and actually just throw yourself more into what's going on. Throw yourself into what the person is saying. Focus your attention outwards rather than getting lost in your own little story. Try and lose yourself a little bit in that actual exchange of what is really going on, and just not exacerbate this feeling of anticipation growing. Okay, so we've looked at some of the most common situations that can occur in the workplace, and I've hopefully given you some useful tips on how to overcome them. And I just want to wrap up by saying this is so worthwhile. This is so worth doing, because it's going to improve your performance at work. You're just going to feel better. You're going to be able to move through your day with more comfort and ease. You're going to come home from work. You're not going to be wrung out emotionally, physically, and mentally. You're going to have emotional and physical bandwidth to play with the kids, to talk to your spouse, your partner. You're not going to dread work. You're not going to be fried all the time. And for me, it led on to this upward spiral where I am now. I'm actually speaking to you from Dubai. And I live a life now that was so different from when I was scurrying around in fear in my 9-to-5 job in the embassy. And it led me to discovering entrepreneurship, which I think is a great thing for many people. It's not for everybody, but I believe it can be a high level of self-actualization. I think we all have special talents that we can give to the world, which aren't always given a place to be expressed in traditional workplace structures. It certainly wasn't for me in the embassy. So you never know where this is going to lead. This whole process with social anxiety goes so much deeper than just dealing with social situations and dealing with other people. It's about yourself. It's about self-actualization and becoming the person that you can really be, and really digging out and unearthing all of that huge potential that we all have inside us. So I hope these have been useful. I hope you will hit the like button and the subscribe button if this video has been helpful for you. And I really look forward to seeing you guys all in future videos.